Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to Slang of Ages Podcast, Season 10, Episode number 1. And on this very special episode, I have returning guest Joe Williams, not Joseph Williams of Toto, but Joe Williams of Normal fame. And Joe's going to ask questions about my new book, which is called Shade of Living Color, which came out just a few days ago. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing good. Although by clarifying I'm not the guy in Toto, you've lost about 75% of your listenership here.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. Every time people hear Joe Williams or Joseph Williams is going to be
Yeah.
on, they get really excited. Then
Yeah.
they see you and they say, "Oh, damn it, it's not that
Surprise.
Joe. He looks totally different than the other guy." Oh well, but you are in fact Joseph Williams. You've been a lifelong supporter of this podcast. You were there when we started. You've been on every season, and you have been my consummate concert buddy, though you didn't want to see Rush with me, which is kind of sad. So you're here now to talk about Shade of Living Color. So I'm going to turn over to you.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you about your third book now, after successful books on the bands Toto and Yes. And so my first question for you is, your first two books were with bands that have kind of a larger discography, kind of a longer or more kind of, more songs in their kind of repertoire. So why choose Living Color as the subject of your third book?
Well, I wanted to pick a band which is one of my favorite bands. And if I look at all my concert stubs, which, only geeks keep little concert tickets, Joe, but go through my concert stub book, I've seen Living Color live, I think 6 times. So, in terms of live acts, they're one of my favorite live acts. Musically, they've been very moving for me, especially the first two albums. So I had that connection there. And it also brings back a memory, which I talk about, I think, in the forward of the book, or not the forward, but in the introduction of the book, one of my favorite concerts where I got to see the Rolling Stones for the first time at RFK Stadium in DC. And Living Color was one of the opening bands, and they were just fantastic. So every time I've seen the band, I love them live. I love most of their albums, but I like all their albums. And I had the opportunity, as you can see from the book, to interview Corey Glover and Vernon Reid and talk about their music and some of their legacy. So that's really the why. The whole purpose of the podcast is to talk about my favorite albums. And a lot of those favorite albums are from favorite groups. Living Color, I think, was featured in season number 1 or 2 of one of my favorite albums. So that's why, Joe.
Yeah, excellent. And first of all, you mentioned you went to see them 6 times. I would like to point out you did not take me to one. You just said I was your concert buddy, and yet I have not been to a Living Color concert with you. So we're just pointing that out. And then my second rant will be I lament the days where we don't get those ticket stubs anymore. And so everything is digital tickets. So that is completely ruining my little concert memory books that I have. But going back to your actual kind of book, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you went to the Rolling Stones concert that Living Color I had like their widest early exposure to. And your book talks a little bit about Mick Jagger's kind of influence on their career. Can you talk a little bit about his involvement in their early stages?
I didn't want to overplay that in the book because I think a lot of people overplay that Mick Jagger was a consummate fan. And he produced, I think it was 2 songs on Vivid, their first album. And both songs were really good. But one of the things that Jagger brought to the band was notoriety, obviously, because he was a big fan early. He knew of Vernon Reid and had seen Vernon Reid. He helped them with some early gigs. And of course, he wanted them on that Rolling Stones tour. In terms of what he did for Vivid, it was, like I said, co-produced 2 of the songs, the rest being produced by, I think it was Ed Stathium. And he did a really good job, and he talked them up in the media, which helped them get signed. And it kind of reminds me in a way of like Stevie Ray Vaughan and how he was discovered, where Jackson Brown had given them studio time for him in the Double Trouble and promoted Stevie Ray Vaughan in Double Trouble. Mick Jagger kind of had the same role with Living Color. He was a big fan early on. Now, later on in the band's discography, Mick Jagger got to work with Doug Wimbish, the bass player. I think Doug played on Mick Jagger's first album, which I believe was Primitive Cool, or maybe not,
Or
but I
does
think he worked on.
She's the Boss come before that?
And you're right, She's a Boss, which had, I think, Doug Wimbish on bass on some songs. And then I think Wimbish even got to tour with Mick Jagger on one of his solo tours, and they're not, I know they're not many. So that's why. That's how Mick Jagger got involved in the band, his influence.
Yeah. And I think most fans of the band, especially know them for their vivid and perhaps Time's Up. Do you think that those are their two best albums, or where do you think that they lie in terms of their discography?
I think it was suck for a band if people thought their first album was their best album of their 30-year career or 40-year career. God, Joe, no, I don't think. I love the first two albums, and I love Shade, their latest album, and also Corey Glover's first album, solo album. I love, as well as Vernon Reid's first and last solo albums. I don't think, though, musically they reached the height of their powers with their first two albums. I think Shade really is the amalgamation of all their knowledge as a band, all their solo work, all coming together, and they're hitting all cylinders in unison. The last album, Shade, was fantastic. Um, and you didn't ask me this question, but I'll volunteer anyway. My favorite Living Colors album is actually Time's Up, their second album. Then Shade, then Vivid, because I think it comes down to sound power. And Shade has some great songs on it, and Time's Up has some great songs on it, and Vivid has some great songs on it. But strength wise, I think they've gotten stronger and stronger in terms of writing. They've really claimed their identity in terms of production with Vernon Reid and the rest of the band doing production themselves. And sonically, they sound wonderful. One of the things that Doug Wimbish brought in the band when he joined for the third album was he brought in a lot more soundscapes for Steen. In a live act, he brought a lot more soundscapes and sampling. Um, some of it touching on his hip hop background and his work as a hip hop artist, but they've progressed every album. So if a fan thinks that Vivid is the ultimate Living Color album, they should really explore the catalog.
Yep. And you've heard it here first. Preston Frazier is all about the shade.
Ain't that the truth?
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that, from first hearing them, you were really, involved with the band, or you really love the band. What's your earliest memory of, Living Color?
Oh man, probably most people's earliest memory of the band. That's videos, seeing the Cult of Personality video, seeing Corey with the dreadlocks and the back then was the '80s, so those skin tight pants that people wore and dancing around the stage, and then hearing that iconic guitar riff from the song. That was probably my earliest memory. I also remember seeing them on Saturday Night Live and seeing them on the Arsenio Hall show and thinking, this is chaotic, but it's so musical, it's so high energy. That's probably my earliest memory, Joe.
Yeah, and I think like mine was probably the MTV era, just hearing Cult of Personality for like the first time. And it really was like a blast, that felt like so different than anything you were hearing, from just any kind of band, especially in terms of like, African American music, which was often put into the pop or R&B category. This felt like moving into a genre that perhaps, African Americans were not really welcomed in, and they just kind of burst the doors down with like that, Blair. Is that your kind of perception of that time?
Yeah, very much so. A lot of people think, oh, blacks don't play rock. Well, we invented rock. We did. We landed and here in Georgia, we had millions of or thousands of black artists playing rock. And you see that in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame slowly in terms of like Sister Rosetta Thorpe being admitted. You have elements like Funkadelic being acknowledged by a lot of rock circles like Red Hot Chili Peppers. And Fishbone, which is a great rock band, is one of the early pioneers. So Living Color was in that legacy of great black rock bands. In my dedication, I talk about the coalition of rock, um, the Black Coalition of Rock, and all those artists as well. So there are plenty of black artists out here who play rock, but it wasn't highly recognized. And one of the things that Living Color did was really blow that door open in terms of having that to the forefront and saying, this is who we are. We're not playing other people's music. This is our music, kind of reclaiming that. And I really appreciate that they did it then. They're still doing it.
Yeah, you mentioned the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which criminally, no, Living Color is not yet a part of. Now, I understand they don't have perhaps the sheer number of radio hits that other bands might have. But in terms of like their seminal influence on music and other bands, do you think that they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or is that something that is not really a concern of theirs?
I didn't ask Vernon or Corey about that when I spoke to them. And I wish I had, but I had a limited amount of time. I don't know if that's something they would want. Is as a fan, it's something I want because it's an acknowledgement of their significant contribution to music. Not just black music, not just rock music, but music, because they have had significant contributions to music. Earlier, you talked about their catalog, maybe not having as many albums as a lot of other catalogs. Because I think they have, in terms of new albums, they have what, five or six, and then one compilation and one live album. Still, the impact of that music, recorded music, is undeniable. It has helped move rock forward, helped move heavy metal forward, it's helped move hip hop forward. And a lot of bands have copied from them and they've influenced a lot of bands. So, should they be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame though they don't sell millions and millions and millions of albums? Yeah. Should they be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame even though they don't have any number one hits from the last three albums? Yeah. Should they be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they haven't, well, they've broken up, what, once, at least once, but and got back together. Should it be Hall of Fame because of their longevity? Probably. They should be in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, period. Yes. And I
Yeah,
don't
because
think, Joe, they've not been nominated, I don't think.
I don't remember them being on that short list, at least definitely in recent years. I
Mm.
believe they've been eligible since like 2014 or so and haven't gotten the groundswell that I think they deserve. So I put them in like the category of bands like the Pixies or the Ramones that may in their time maybe didn't have like the huge radio hits, but their influence, and if you can listen to bands talking about who influenced them the most, they're clearly like in that type of category.
Yeah, I would agree, Joe. I mean, the Pixies and Ramones aren't like huge stadium artists, but they have a dedicated following. They have a lot of sold out shows. I think Living Color, in terms of sales of tickets, is probably the same stature as those two bands, the Pixies and the Ramones. Living Color did have a tour schedule for 2026 with Extreme, but Extreme had to back out for some reason. So I know they're going to scramble to get some other dates. But yeah, they're definitely artists that have enough of a following and sell enough tickets to be recognized. But the content and the breadth of their musicality is unquestionable, and their albums are fantastic, and they continue to progress.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned. I think they're thinking of going on tour with Extreme, which is not like two bands I would put together, musically. How would you categorize Living Color, as a genre? Would you say they're hard rock, punk, heavy metal,
Mm.
or some just total fusion of so many genres?
And fusion's always a cop out. I'll go with fusion.
Yeah.
Um, okay, punk rock reminds me of people who can't play their instruments. and don't have a sense of melody. That's certainly not in Living Color. Living Color is very melodic, and obviously they're all craftsmen at their instruments. And you have three members who have had stellar solo careers doing instrumental work. You have one member who has been working with a number of different bands, or lead singer Corey, of course, with like Galactic, and has his own solo career as well with some fantastic albums. You have a sought after drummer who can play metal like anybody, but is a sought after jazz drummer. Right now, Will Calhoun's on tour with Rachel Z because Omar Hakim, her husband, is recovering from an surgery. Then you have Doug Wimbish, who's done hip hop, rap, funk, uh, Mick Jagger, you name it. So, in terms of musicality, that band is Living Color is just amazing. But in terms of the actual songs, they have great songs. And one thing that Irving Azoff, the whole frontline management head and Eagle manager, used to say, it's all about the songs. That's what gets you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's debatable, but it's also all about the songs in terms of having longevity. And Living Colors songs are incredible.
Now, when most people think of Living Color, I think the two names that come to mind, are Vernon Reid and Corey Glover. Now you've talked to both of them, and also have kind of followed their, careers in Living Color and solo careers. How do you think? How would you describe their contributions to the band Living Color?
Wow, hard question.
That's what I'm here for.
Um,
The hard hitting journalism.
yeah, exactly. Um, Vernon, well, as I mentioned in the book, Living Color was originally a three-man band, three-piece band, kind of like Cream with Vernon, Muzz Skillen, and Will Calhoun, and Vernon was singing. Now, the first two albums, Vernon had a disproportionate, not disproportionate, he had a large amount of writing credits for lyrics and music, and Vernon can write lyrics and music. On his solo work, he does not sing often. I think on Shade, not on his last album, not Shade, on the last solo album, he sang one song on Voodoo Telemetry, which was came out in 2026, 25. So Vernon's contribution is incredible in terms of the writing, especially early on, and the arranging. Later, all four members have been involved in production of the albums. Will has been highly involved, Doug Wimbish, as well as Corey and Vernon. Um, People overlook, I guess, Corey's contributions because he really started out as a singer and didn't really write much. And now he's heavily involved in the writing process for Living Color. And he was heavily involved and is heavily involved in the writing process for solo work. As I mentioned, Doug, in terms of soundscapes and in terms of samples, has been extremely active that way, both in the studio and live. And also Will, in terms of samples, in terms of the arranging and writing, has been extremely involved. So now it's probably more of a partnership, a full way partnership than it was ever before. I think one of the issues the band had in after their second album, going into the third album, which led to the breakup after the third album, was that they felt they weren't being able to express themselves fully as a band. There was some disagreement with regard to how they were going in the direction as a band. And they still have some of that discussion. There's still some tension. But I think any band, like any family, has tension. It usually helps the creative process if it's not overwhelming. And I think right now they're managing it pretty well.
Now, you mentioned, the other two band members who have made important contributions, so Will Calhoun and Doug Wimbush. So, they may not get the press that, Vernon Reid and Corey Glover, get, but can you give us some interesting tidbits that you found about Will Calhoun and Doug Wimbush that you found when you were researching your book?
I've never met Will or Doug. I have seen them live, obviously, a bunch of times, but never met them or talked to them. and I have met Vernon. Um, I think it was at Park West in Chicago, Joe. I didn't go to the concert with you though, so never mind. But
So that's
uh,
seven that you went to without me. But go on.
but in terms of you were asking about contributions of what they've done
Or
solo
just something
wise.
interesting you found about them, like your favorite Doug Wimbish or Will Calhoun tidbits.
Well, I think for Doug Wimbish, the biggest change or biggest area that I was not exposed to was his involvement with a lot of different rap and hip hop artists, not only as a player, but people who have sampled him and and help he's provided in terms of production. Um, his career as a stellar bassist is undisputed, but most people don't know that he really is thought of in the hip hop and R&B community. With Will Calhoun, it's a little bit different because Will has been a respected drummer as long as Vernon has been a respected guitarist and Doug has been a respected bass player. But Will has been sought by a lot of people with regard to his drumming skills. But more importantly, I guess for his solo work, his world music skills. I mean, he has a number of world music albums I touch on in the book, which have brought great joy to people and are really a big shift away from what he does in the pop world, what he does in the rock world. So I think that people, especially like the album Native Land is one that comes to mind for Will Calhoun. People should check that out and then dig into the rabbit hole of Will Calhoun's catalog because he has an extensive instrumental catalog.
And you also mentioned the breakup, so it's hard to like not talk about that. Where pretty much at the height of their career, they decided to call it, quits at least for a while before the, reunion. Do you think like that left a void of, the hard rock African American kind of influence on, that once they kind of broke up?
I don't think it left a void. I mean, the fact is that there were still are we talked about Fishbone already, but there are a number of hard rock bands or fusion bands of rock and punk and funk out there. I don't think it was a void. I think what happened was an important voice was silenced when Living Color went dark for those few years. I think it was what 8, 9 years or so, and that was right after the Stain album. Um, and I think also there's a polar shift in terms of the music industry at that time too, Joe. If you remember that, things like punk was pretty much over by that point, but you still had a lot of new wave, you had grunge really taking over the landscape. And Living Color's music isn't grunge, but I think more importantly, they were feeling they were a little bit lost in terms of where they wanted to go as a band. There were disagreements about their direction, and they were feeling they weren't being able to express themselves individually enough to keep that band going. So, was there a void when Living Color left? Um, in my mind, sure, it was a void because they were so unique. And when they came back, I think they came back with a renewed vigor and they were appreciated more by their fans.
Yeah, and talking with like Vernon, Reid, and Corey Glover, do you get the sense that they think the breakup that time was the right decision for them, as a band and musically, or do you think that they wish they had resolved some of the problems and kept going at that time and not broken up?
My impression is that they were very uh, happy with the direction they were taking after the breakup. Vernon did some wonderful solo albums. He worked with the group Mask. The Himby Brothers projects were fantastic. Corey's first solo album which I referenced in the book, was Hymns. It's still one of my favorite albums, period, of all time. They were comfortable with the direction they were going. They weren't comfortable with what the band was, and it happened at a good time. I don't know many bands that break up and then get back together who are sorry about breaking up. Most of them need a break from each other. And I think Living Color needed a break from each other. And I think the weird thing is that they broke up after they added a new member. I mean, Doug Wimbish joined after Mug Skilling had left after completion of Time's Up and Swerve Time's Up. So he came in before they started Stain and contributed to Stain. Then he broke up after Stain. So yeah, they were ready to break up and they were ready to get back together again.
Yeah, and your book talks about their decision to get back together and reunite. Can you go a little bit more into, that decision or, to reunite?
They were feeling that it was time to test the waters and see if they can work together again as a four-man partnership. Um, I think that for Vernon, if I recall in the interview, I talked about his record contract, or he had just ended his contract with, I think, Columbia Records after three or four records. Corey was still doing solo shows and solo work. Doug was busy with studio work, as was Will. I believe, Joe, they began to miss that partnership, that four-way partnership, that communication they had, and also that type of music they were doing, because really none of the four did Living Color Part Two on the solo tour, solo work. Vernon didn't do another band like Living Color. He really got into the world of instrumentals, world of duet albums, world of fusing hard rock with hip hop. Corey was more soul based, R&B based. So no, they didn't. They learned something from their solo time, and they were ready at that point to bring it back together.
So when you listen to some of their newer, material, do you see the influence of that time off on the way the band sounds now?
Hmm. Well, newer material. We're talking about the last album came out what 4 or 5 years ago. Shade was the last album. I think that first of all, Shade, as opposed to the album which came before it, or the album before that, the production was smoother, cleaner. It was a little bit more minimalist, if you can call it that. It's hard to call Living Color music minimalist, but it was more direct. I think that the songs actually, and again, going back to what I said earlier, it's about song power. I think the songs were stronger when they reconvened for Shade versus Window, The Door, or the album before that. I think they got back together. They had stronger material, they had a stronger vision, and the production was sharper.
Yeah. And you mentioned like the album Shade, and your book is called Shade of Living, Color. So
Mhm.
I probably just pieced it together now, the meaning of the title, but am I correct that the title of your book refers a little bit to your favorite album as well?
Yeah, I have gotten in the habit of. Well, first of all, I have to say you didn't give me a book title this time, Joe, like you did for the first
Well,
book.
I racked my
Totally.
brain. I kept trying to think of one, and all I came up with were really bad puns or references to the 1990s Wayans Brothers TV show in Living Color. So I did not even submit one to you because they were not up to that level.
I wanted a clever title, and I wanted one that referred to either a song in the album or the album itself. So I thought that Shade of Living Color talks about the dark and the light of the band and alludes to their latest album. I'm not saying their last album. Um, I didn't want to use the chair in the doorway or anything else. I thought that. I mean, I thought about Time's Up too, but yeah, I like Shade of Living Color. I think it's a
Yeah.
nice title.
Yeah, and I think it's subtle and it rewards those who really know the discography, which I keep saying that word and I have a hard time pronouncing it. So, but yet by the end of this podcast, I'm gonna pronounce it right at least one time, I think, without stumbling over the words. Now, also a part of your books, and it's actually a signature of all three of your books, is that you do like a track by track type of analysis of the key kind of tracks throughout their career. And so, given that, what are some of your favorite actual songs? So we talked about your favorite albums, but what are your actual favorite songs of
Oh
theirs?
man. Okay, so I would say. That is hard. I like the my what's my favorite song? Where do I start? Um, I would say "Type" from their second album is one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite Living Color song. Love the riff. I love the lyrics because it's really about social commentary on who we are as a people and how we get along. From the same album, though, "Open Letter to a Landlord" is extremely popular and with good reason because it has such a wonderful, wonderful feel to it. So that's one of my favorites of all time. I'm gonna try to give you two more. Let's see. From Shade, the last or latest album rather, I'm gonna go with the song, which is a cover. I think it's a Biggie Smalls cover of "Who Shot You," which is a great combination of um, a rap feel with amazing mean guitar licks by Vernon Reid. So that is one of my favorites. And then going to the first album, one of my favorite songs, period, is Elvis is, no, it's the second album actually. Elvis is Dead. Elvis is Dead, which has the rap by, it has James Brown singing some backgrounds there, and it has a rap by someone I can't recall right now. So those are my favorites, Joe.
Great. And every time someone asks me, like, what is my favorite song by a band, I always want to be hip and find some deep cut that shows my band thing. But then if I admit to myself, it's always a really popular radio song. And in this case, it would be Glamour Boys, for me. So what's your opinion of Glamour Boys and my choice for my favorite Living Color song?
Lemon Boys has a great hook. It's fun, it's catchy, it's a good pop song. Um, and that was one that Jagger produced, if I recall. It's a good song. It's just, and quite frankly, it's a song we need at the time because we wanted to bring people into the fold. And the song is not too difficult. It's has that chanting, that nice chorus to it. It's a great song. But quite frankly, the first two albums are no bad songs. On the last album, there are no bad songs. On the other two albums, there's songs which I don't think are great, but there's songs which are good. So there you go.
Yeah, great. And so we mentioned that, Living Color got one of their big breaks opening for the Rolling Stones in terms of like a really wide, exposure. If you're putting together a ultimate Living Color concert today, who would you put on the bill with them? Who do you think are their kind of kindred spirits?
I don't like multiple groups, Joe.
I'm
I
a
just want
bang for your
one
buck
band. I
kind of
don't want an opening
person.
band. I will. I would have. Well, I would love to have seen or see Living Color at Lollapalooza. I'm not sure if they've ever played it, but I think that would be good. I would love to see Living Color with Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is a Chili Peppers are almost they're a funk band. They really are. They play like a funk band, and they have that rock edge to them. Honestly, I think that would be a good mix. I would like to see Chili Peppers. I mean, the Living Color with a on a bill with Frank Black's band. What's his name? Black
The,
Frank's band. The
oh,
Pixies.
right,
Yes,
the Pixies.
yes. Or, and this is kind of a weird combination, Living Color with the Pretenders.
That would
So
be a cool
that
combo.
would be a weird, weird
Yeah.
80s kind of mix. So yeah, those are my choices.
Yeah, I think Red Hot Chili Peppers would actually be a really great, fit for, those. I'm also thinking just a really out of left field. I would like to see them perform on a bill with like Tracy Chapman. I think like
Hmm.
that, well, like that feels like it's the vibe, not necessarily music styles, but just in terms of like influence, it feels like they would do something really interesting, together.
Yeah, socially conscious groups. I don't know if Tracy tours with a band now or not. I know for a while she didn't. And so I don't know.
Yeah. And so, one question is: we know like the legacy of the band and the influence they've had, for just for in terms of music and African American representation in certain genres. What do you think their influence is today on music?
I think they are legacies that they embody music itself. It's not about black or white. It's not about rich or poor. It's not about rock or non-rock. They are comfortable in their own skin being who they are. And that identity, that certainty of identity, that focus is probably their legacy. They don't placate others. They don't try to be other bands. They don't pander. They don't beg for a hit. They are who they are. They're their authentic self. And that's one of the things I appreciate about Living Color.
And I think that's especially important, especially in this world where, you need that one viral hit, the influence of social media, and those who don't necessarily play that game sometimes have a harder path, to a long career in music. And so that they stick to their guns and play the music that they want to play and they think is meaningful, I think is a important contribution as a whole. Now, I know like when, at least one of my favorite parts of writing is actually doing research and just kind of doing that deep dive. Are there any discoveries that you found as you were doing your, research that deepened your understanding of the band?
Well, I think the biggest discovery for me is the breadth of of their solo material as individuals. I kind of knew about Vernon's career, and I think I have almost all his solo albums after he formed Living Color. But Corey, Doug, and Will, a lot of stuff I just didn't own, so I bought it, a lot of it, and really fell in love with most of their stuff, and even Vernon's stuff before Living Color. For example, he did a duet guitar album with Bill Frisell. I had a copy of that years ago and finally just found it in my basement. So the breadth of the material outside of Living Color is amazing.
Hey, and did you find like any, myths about the band or long, standing like truths that you found were actually not, true or that you feel like need clearing up?
No, not really, Joe. I mean, there's the obvious one about Corey Glover being Danny Glover's son, which of course he isn't. But
Oh,
beyond that,
but
no, it's nothing.
in my world, I want that to be true, so I think it
Yes.
is.
Yeah, especially since Corey was, is an actor and was
Yeah.
in Platoon and some other projects as well. And did some stage projects too.
I just want to hear Corey Glover say, "I'm too old for this shit." Just at least one time, work it into a song somewhere, a concert aside.
Yeah, I'll have to mention that to him when I see him next time.
Yeah. I take little to bring joy to my life. So
Yep, I'm with you.
now this is like your third book after I'm going to give plugs to your first two, which are also great and people should look up. Toto, the band, not the dog, and Yes, Indeed. So how do you think that this third book is different or similar to your first two, either in terms of like how you approached it, your storytelling style, etc.?
And the style is very similar to Yes Indeed Tales of Yes without John Anderson, in that I incorporated individual track summaries and talk about the production. I also created a narrative around the studio and their dialogues in the studio and the making of the album. With the Toto book, Toto the band, not the dog, I really just did a track by track analysis, and I did almost every Toto song except for the live albums. With Yes and Details from Yes without John Anderson, I did not want to do the entire Yes catalog. Number one, because there's some great books about the entire Yes catalog. Number two, because it's so much. So with Living Color, there's a lot less material in terms of recorded material, but there's still a great story which I wanted to incorporate, and then add some fictionalized elements in my narrative, which I did, but also do the track by track breakdown. And I thought it was very important that I mentioned the solo work of all the members of Living Color in the book, which I did.
Great. And, so I know this book is just coming out and you're
Yep.
kind of engrossed in,
Yep.
making this one a bestseller, which it kind of deserves to be. Have you given any thoughts about what your next book is going to be, or is that too
People
early to
ask that
start thinking
question.
about?
Yeah, I am thinking about it because people always ask that question, and when I finish one, I think, do I want to do this again or not? And you know how that is because you've been writing for a long time. I have avoided the obvious for me because I started writing, what, 15, 20 years ago about Steely Dan, for on the Steely Dan Sunday column for Something Else Reviews. I think my next book will be a book about Steely Dan. I have a rough outline done already, and I think it'll be a different take than what you usually see about Steely Dan. So it'll probably be Steely Dan. I have been thinking about some other African American artists. One I was going to do, and then a very famous filmmaker came out with a really good documentary on that band. So I'm not going to do that. And there's another black band I'm thinking of doing. So I will decide probably by the end of the year and start the writing process in December.
That's that being knowing what a big Steely Dan aficionado you are, I was wondering, okay, when is that Steely Dan book going to be, written? And given that so much has been written about them, how would you kind of do a good angle? So I'll be interested if that, does come to fruition. So I think those are the main questions that I had, for you. Is there any kind of last take-home messages you want, like the listeners, to know about, either your book or Living Band in general, or Living Color in general?
Yeah, Joe, thanks for asking that. I think that Shade of Living Color is a very good and entertaining look at a really influential, wonderful band, which is still out there, still vibrant. They're on tour now, and they plan on continuing to produce music. When I talked to Vernon last year, he talked about his solo album, obviously, but he also talked about moving the band forward. And I know they've been working on some songs for a while now. So I would encourage, if you're a casual fan of the band Living Color, pick up the book. If you're a long-term hardcore fan, you're going to love the narrative, you're going to love the storytelling, and you may or may not agree with my takes on each song. Like, I think you'll find it entertaining. So go out and get Shades of Living Color. And Joe, I appreciate you.
Great, and thank you for this great conversation about a really important band.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to sign off now.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Thank you.